The crystal glass slipped from Adrian Kang's hand as he saw Evelyn on the floor. The sound of it breaking echoed through the silent penthouse, but why did a single moment stop the most feared man in the city? Adrian had built his empire on control. Every meeting, every decision, every person around him moved according to his rules. The Korean Mafia Boss was known for his cold expression and impossible discipline. Nothing surprised him. Nothing reached him. Until that night. The elevator doors opened on the top floor of his Manhattan penthouse, releasing a quiet mechanical hum into the empty hallway. The marble beneath Adrian's shoes reflected the soft golden lights above, and the air carried the faint scent of expensive wood and fresh flowers from the entrance. He had returned earlier than expected after a long night of business meetings. He expected silence. Instead, he heard a small sound coming from the private living area. Not an alarm. Not a threat. Something softer. Adrian stepped forward, his black coat still resting on his shoulders. Then he stopped. Evelyn Carter, his black maid, was kneeling beside the fireplace. Her simple uniform was slightly dusted with ash as she carefully rescued a small wooden box that had fallen behind the furniture. The flames cast warm orange reflections across her dark skin, and the quiet crackle of the fire filled the room. She did not notice him standing there. She was focused on protecting something that clearly mattered to someone else. Adrian watched as she gently cleaned the box with a cloth instead of throwing it away. Most people in his world protected valuable things because they wanted something in return. Evelyn protected something because it deserved care. "What are you doing?" His voice cut through the room. Evelyn turned quickly. Her eyes widened when she saw him. She immediately stood and lowered her head. "Mr. Kang. I apologize. I was only trying to clean the area near the fireplace." Adrian looked at the box in her hands. "That does not answer my question." Evelyn held it carefully. "It was hidden behind the cabinet. I thought it belonged to you." The room became quiet. Adrian walked closer. The polished wooden floor reflected his figure beside hers, a powerful man in a tailored suit standing across from a woman everyone in the house barely noticed. "You could have ignored it," he said. Evelyn looked at the box. "Some things should not be forgotten just because they are hidden." The words were simple. But Adrian felt something shift. He had heard thousands of carefully chosen words from people trying to impress him. These were different. She was not trying to gain anything. She did not even realize the effect they had. Evelyn placed the box on the table and stepped back. "I will finish cleaning." She turned away, but Adrian stopped her. "Wait." She looked back. For a moment, the man who commanded entire rooms had no immediate order to give. The silence between them felt unfamiliar. The next morning, Adrian found himself standing in the same room before breakfast. The wooden box remained on the table. Sunlight passed through the glass windows, touching the surface of the box, while the quiet sound of the city moved far below. He opened it and found that Evelyn had carefully preserved everything inside. Nothing had been moved. Nothing had been damaged. For the first time in years, Adrian wondered why the person with the least power inside his home was the one who showed the most respect. Later that day, he watched Evelyn from across the penthouse as she quietly helped a new employee who had made a mistake. No anger. No judgment. Just patience. Adrian had spent his life learning how people behaved when they wanted something from him. But Evelyn was different. And when he walked into the room that evening and saw her kindness again, his carefully controlled world began to face the one thing he could not command, a feeling he did not understand. Adrian Kang noticed the change before anyone else did. The man who once walked through his penthouse like a shadow now stopped when Evelyn entered the room. The sound of her footsteps on the marble floor, the quiet clink of porcelain cups in her hands, and the soft scent of fresh coffee drifting through the morning air had somehow become impossible for him to ignore. For years, Adrian had surrounded himself with people who feared him. His employees lowered their voices when he passed. His rivals measured every word before speaking. But Evelyn never looked at him like a monster or a king. She simply looked at him like a person. That unsettled him more than any enemy ever had. The penthouse kitchen was filled with pale morning light reflecting off the steel surfaces. Evelyn placed a cup of coffee near his desk and stepped away. "You remembered how I take it," Adrian said, looking at the cup. She paused. "You mentioned it once." Adrian lifted his eyes. "Most people forget things I say." Evelyn folded the towel in her hands. "Maybe they listen only because they are afraid." The answer was quiet, but it stayed in the room. Adrian watched her return to her work. She was not trying to challenge him. She was not trying to impress him. She simply spoke the truth as she saw it. Later that afternoon, Adrian walked through the private dining area and found Evelyn cleaning after a small gathering. Empty glasses stood on the table, the scent of expensive wine still hanging in the air, and golden lights reflected across the polished surface. Everyone who had attended had left compliments for Adrian's wealth, his influence, his success. Yet none of them had noticed the broken chair leg near the corner where one of the younger staff members had struggled all evening. Evelyn was quietly repairing it herself. Adrian watched her kneel beside the chair with a small toolkit. "Why are you doing that?" he asked. Evelyn looked up. "Because someone will need it tomorrow. Someone else could handle it." She tightened the final screw and placed the chair back in position. "Someone else always could." Her words carried no accusation. Only reality. Adrian stepped closer. The expensive room suddenly felt colder than the empty streets outside. "You think I do not notice things?" he asked. Evelyn met his eyes. "I think powerful people are often surrounded by people who only show them what they want to see." The silence afterward was heavier than any argument. That evening, Adrian made a decision without announcing it. He changed the security access around the penthouse. Not because Evelyn was a threat. Because for the first time, he wanted to know who entered his world and who left it. The next morning, Evelyn arrived to find a new key card waiting beside her workstation. She picked it up and looked at Adrian. "This is for me?" "Yes." "Why?" Adrian looked toward the city beyond the glass windows. Thousands of lights burned below, but his voice remained low. "Because you are the only person here who does not ask for anything." Evelyn held the card but did not smile. "Mr. Kang, kindness does not mean ownership." The words stopped him. The room was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic below. Adrian had spent years controlling doors, buildings, and entire organizations. But Evelyn was the first person who reminded him that opening a door was not the same as locking someone inside. And when Adrian later saw Evelyn preparing to leave the penthouse after her shift ended, he realized he was facing a choice he had never prepared for: let her walk away like everyone else, or finally show her why this place had begun to feel different with her in it. Adrian Kang saw Evelyn's hand on the penthouse door and stopped before the elevator could close. The soft click of the lock, the cold shine of the marble hallway, and the faint scent of rain carried in from the city streets made the moment feel strangely permanent. She was leaving after another long shift, carrying the same worn canvas bag she had arrived with months earlier. No demands. No complaints. No attempt to be noticed. Just one quiet step away from a world that had never truly been hers. "You are leaving?" Adrian asked. Evelyn turned, surprised to see him standing there without his usual suit jacket and without the distance he carried like armor. "My work is finished, Mr. Kang." The answer was simple. It should have been enough. But Adrian found himself staring at the empty space beside her where the warmth of her presence had been moments before. The penthouse, with its towering windows and silent rooms, suddenly looked larger and emptier than ever. The next morning, Adrian changed his routine. For years, his mornings began with phone calls, business reports, and decisions made by people who waited for his approval. That day, he sat at the kitchen counter while Evelyn prepared breakfast for the staff. The sound of a knife tapping against a wooden board filled the room. Steam rose from a bowl of soup, carrying the smell of ginger and herbs through the quiet kitchen. "You usually eat alone," Evelyn said without looking up. "I usually do." "Then why are you here?" Adrian looked at the untouched reports beside him. "I do not know." It was the first honest answer he had given her. Evelyn placed a cup of tea in front of him. A person who does not know what they want can hurt people trying to find out. Adrian looked at her carefully. She was not afraid of his reputation. She was not impressed by his wealth. She spoke to him the same way she spoke to everyone. That was exactly what made her different. Later that evening, Adrian returned from a meeting earlier than expected. The penthouse was dim except for the warm glow of a single lamp near the living area. He found Evelyn repairing a torn sleeve on her uniform before leaving. The small needle moved carefully through the fabric. The sound was almost invisible beneath the quiet hum of the city. "Why do you keep fixing things that are not yours?" Adrian asked. Evelyn folded the sleeve. "Because throwing things away is easier than caring for them." The sentence stayed with him. Adrian had spent years replacing people, places, and problems the moment they became inconvenient. But Evelyn treated everything as if it still had value. Even things others ignored. The following day, Adrian noticed her struggling with an old service elevator that had been making noise for weeks. Instead of calling someone, she carefully placed a handwritten note on the panel warning others not to use it. Adrian watched from the hallway before walking over. "You could have left it for maintenance. Someone could get hurt. You are not responsible for everything here." Evelyn looked at him. "Maybe not. But I am responsible for what I see." Adrian immediately called the building manager and ordered the elevator repaired. The staff members watching from nearby froze. They had never seen him stop for something so small. They had never seen him listen. That night, Adrian stood alone beside the glass wall overlooking the city. The reflection showed a man who controlled every entrance and exit around him, yet he could not understand why one person's kindness had become the one thing he could not command. When Evelyn finally prepared to leave again, Adrian stepped forward and placed a small envelope on the table. She opened it and saw a new employment agreement with better conditions and a private room inside the penthouse. Her eyes moved back to him. "Why are you doing this?" Adrian answered quietly, "Because I want you to stay." The words were not a command. They were a request. But Evelyn slowly closed the envelope and placed it back on the table. "Then you need to understand something, Mr. Kang. A door can protect someone, or it can become a cage." Adrian watched her walk away, and for the first time in his life, the most powerful man in the room realized he was afraid of losing the one person who had never wanted anything from him. Adrian Kang had faced enemies in boardrooms, streets, and silent negotiations, but nothing prepared him for the moment Evelyn placed the agreement back in his hands. The thin paper touched the polished wood table with a quiet sound, the warm light from the penthouse lamps reflecting across the glass surface between them. "I appreciate what you are offering," she said, "but I cannot stay somewhere just because someone wants me there." Adrian looked at the contract, then at her. No one had ever returned something he offered. Not money. Not protection. Not power. The city outside continued moving, car lights sliding across the windows like streams of gold, but inside the penthouse, every second felt suspended. Evelyn picked up her old canvas bag and walked toward the elevator. Adrian followed, stopping several feet away. "Where will you go?" he asked. She pressed the button and watched the numbers glow red above the doors. "I will figure it out." The answer was calm, but the empty hallway seemed to echo it back. Adrian knew that sentence. He had heard it from people who had nothing left except their pride. The elevator doors opened with a soft mechanical sound. Before Evelyn stepped inside, Adrian spoke again. "Wait." She turned. He reached into his pocket and removed a small black access card. Unlike the one he had given her before, this one had no restrictions, no conditions attached. "This is not a job card," he said. "It is access to the guest residence." Evelyn looked at it but did not take it. Why? Adrian's voice lowered. Because if you need somewhere safe, you should not have to ask. The silence between them grew. Evelyn studied his face, searching for the hidden demand behind the offer. She found none. But she still shook her head. Mr. Kang, safety without freedom is still a kind of fear. The elevator doors closed before Adrian could answer. The next day, the penthouse felt different. The quiet halls, the expensive furniture, the endless view of Seoul's skyline all remained the same, yet something was missing. Adrian noticed small things he had never paid attention to before. The empty coffee cup that no longer sat beside his desk. The folded towels no longer placed perfectly in the guest bathroom. The faint smell of lavender soap that had lingered near the entrance. He walked through rooms designed by architects and decorated by professionals, but none of them felt as alive as when Evelyn moved through them. That afternoon, Adrian made an unusual decision. He left the penthouse and went downstairs to the staff area himself. The marble floors changed to simple tile. The air smelled of detergent and fresh linen. Conversation stopped when he entered. "Where is Evelyn staying?" he asked. The employees exchanged uncertain looks. One finally answered, she refused company housing. She said she could manage. Adrian looked at the small schedule board on the wall. Her name had already been removed from the next week's assignments. She had chosen to disappear completely rather than accept something that made her feel trapped. That realization followed him back upstairs. Late that night, Adrian stood before the massive glass doors of the penthouse balcony. The cold air touched his face, and the distant city noise blended with the sound of his phone vibrating. His assistant had sent him an address. Evelyn was working temporary shifts at a small neighborhood cafe across town. Adrian stared at the message for a long moment. Every instinct he had built over years told him to fix the situation immediately. To use his influence. To open doors. But this time, he understood the difference between helping someone and controlling their path. The next morning, Adrian walked into the cafe alone. The small bell above the door rang. The smell of fresh bread and coffee filled the narrow room. Evelyn looked up from behind the counter and froze when she saw him standing there. He did not bring security. He did not bring contracts. He simply placed a cup on the table and said, "I came to ask, not to order." And for the first time, the woman who had walked away from his world saw the powerful man who was finally learning how to enter hers. The cafe fell silent when Adrian Kang stepped through the door. The small bell above the entrance stopped swinging, the smell of roasted coffee beans mixed with warm bread filling the narrow space, and every sound from the crowded street outside seemed to fade behind the glass windows. Evelyn stood behind the counter holding a coffee cup, watching the man who once owned every room he entered now standing in a place where nobody knew his name. "You came all the way here just to ask," she said. Adrian removed his coat and placed it over the back of a chair. "Yes." The answer surprised her more than any grand gesture could have. He did not bring security. He did not bring paperwork. He did not bring a solution that had already been decided. He simply sat down. For the next hour, Adrian listened. Evelyn explained that she had worked in many homes before his penthouse. Some owners treated employees like furniture. Others treated kindness as something they could buy. She had learned to leave before gratitude became another form of control. The afternoon sunlight moved across the cafe floor, reflecting against the wooden tables and the glass display case filled with pastries. The sound of dishes being washed behind the counter mixed with quiet conversations from customers nearby. Adrian listened without interrupting. When she finished, he looked down at the coffee in front of him. "I thought protecting someone meant making sure nothing could reach them." Evelyn wiped the counter slowly. "Sometimes protection means standing beside someone. Not standing above them." The words followed him long after he left. The next week, something changed inside Adrian's world. He began appearing at the cafe regularly, not as a powerful businessman, but as someone willing to wait in line. Employees who once feared his name saw him carrying his own coffee and thanking the staff. Evelyn noticed every small change but said nothing. She had seen people change temporarily before. She needed actions, not promises. One evening, Adrian returned to the cafe during closing time. The lights were softer, the chairs were placed upside down on tables, and the scent of cleaning solution filled the air. Evelyn was counting the register when she saw him standing near the door. "You should not be here this late," she said. Adrian looked around the empty cafe. "Neither should you." She gave a small smile. "This is my choice." That sentence stopped him. It was the difference he had been trying to understand. Evelyn was not asking him to rescue her. She was asking him to respect her choices. Adrian stepped closer but kept his distance. "Then I want to make a choice too." Evelyn looked at him. "What choice?" He reached into his pocket and placed the old penthouse access card on the counter. "I am canceling it." Her eyes moved to the card. "Why?" "Because I gave you a key when I should have given you an invitation." The cafe became completely quiet. The refrigerator hummed softly in the background. Rain tapped against the window, leaving small trails across the glass. Adrian continued, "If you ever return, it will be because you want to. Not because I made it impossible to leave." For the first time, Evelyn saw the powerful man from a different angle. Not because he had opened another door for her, but because he had finally stopped trying to close one. A few days later, Adrian received unexpected news. The cafe owner was forced to sell the building, and Evelyn's position would disappear within the month. When Adrian heard, his assistant immediately offered to purchase the property. But Adrian stopped him. He looked at the report, then quietly said, "Find out what Evelyn wants. Do not fix it before asking." And that simple decision changed everything, because the next time Adrian saw Evelyn, she was the one standing at his door. This time, she was not leaving. She was asking why he had changed. Evelyn stood at Adrian Kang's penthouse door holding the same canvas bag she had carried the first day she entered his world. The hallway lights reflected across the polished marble floor, the quiet hum of the elevator echoed behind her, and the scent of fresh flowers from the entrance table lingered in the air. But this time, she was not walking away. "Why did you stop?" she asked. Adrian looked at her from across the room. The question was not about the cafe, the contract, or the access card. It was about the man standing in front of her. "Because I realized I was trying to protect something I was afraid to lose," he said. Evelyn placed the bag on the floor. "And what was that?" Adrian glanced around the penthouse. The enormous windows, the expensive furniture, the silent rooms that once represented his power now seemed different. "The person who reminded me I was still human." The words remained between them. No dramatic gesture followed. No promises. Just the truth. The next few weeks changed the rhythm of the penthouse. Evelyn did not return as an employee. She returned as someone with a choice. She kept her own schedule, made her own decisions, and came and went without asking permission. Adrian noticed the difference immediately. The security team received new instructions. The doors that once required approval opened freely for her. The staff members watched quietly as the most powerful man in the building changed the rules around one person's freedom. One evening, Adrian found Evelyn in the kitchen preparing dinner. The warm glow from the stove lights touched the wooden counters, and the sound of boiling soup mixed with the soft rain hitting the glass windows. "You changed everything," she said. Adrian leaned against the counter. "No. You did." Evelyn shook her head. "I only asked you to listen." Adrian looked at the simple meal in front of him. For years, people had brought him expensive dinners in silent rooms. Yet this ordinary moment felt more valuable than any luxury he owned. "Nobody has ever spoken to me that way," he admitted. Evelyn placed a bowl on the table. "Maybe because nobody thought you would listen." The following day, Adrian faced a difficult decision. His business partners wanted him to remove Evelyn completely from his personal life. They believed someone like her did not belong near a man with his reputation. During the meeting, the glass conference room was filled with cold white lighting, the sound of papers moving across the table, and voices carefully measuring every word. "You are allowing emotions to affect your judgment," one executive said. Adrian closed the folder in front of him. "No. I am finally making judgments based on something other than fear." The room went silent. It was the first time anyone had seen Adrian reject the expectations placed on him. When he returned home, Evelyn noticed the change immediately. Something happened. Adrian removed his jacket and placed it over the chair. "People told me I should decide who belongs in my life." She looked at him. "And what did you say?" Adrian walked toward the balcony doors. The city lights flickered below, and the cool night air moved through the open space. "I said they were wrong." For the first time, Evelyn saw Adrian choose something without trying to control the outcome. But that night, another problem arrived. A message appeared on Adrian's phone from an unknown sender. It contained a simple warning: "The woman beside you will become your weakness." Adrian stared at the screen, then slowly locked the phone. He had spent his entire life building walls to keep people away. Now those walls were being tested by the one person who had never tried to enter them. And this time Adrian knew he could not protect Evelyn by pushing her away. He would have to prove that keeping someone close did not mean taking away their freedom. The message on Adrian Kang's phone remained unanswered, but the words followed him through the night. The penthouse was unusually quiet. The soft glow from the city reflected across the glass walls, the low hum of the air system filled the empty space, and the faint scent of coffee from Evelyn's cup on the kitchen counter reminded him that someone had finally brought warmth into a place built around control. Adrian stared at the locked screen, then placed the phone face down. He knew threats. He knew pressure. But this felt different. This was not an attack on his business. It was an attack on the one thing he could not force into staying. The next morning, Evelyn noticed the change before he said anything. Adrian was quieter. The usual sharp movements, the quick decisions, the constant calls had slowed. She found him standing near the window, watching the city below. "Something happened," she said. Adrian did not turn around immediately. "Someone reminded me that people close to me can become targets." Evelyn placed a tray on the table. The sound of ceramic touching wood broke the silence. "And your answer?" Adrian finally looked at her. "To send you away would be the easiest thing." She waited. "But it would also be the same mistake I made before." The room stayed still. Evelyn understood what he meant. For years, Adrian had solved every problem by creating distance. But distance was not always protection. Sometimes it was simply another way of losing someone. That afternoon, Adrian made a decision that shocked everyone around him. He changed the security system of the penthouse. Not to restrict Evelyn. To give her control. The access panel near the entrance was replaced. New permissions were created. Evelyn could choose which areas she wanted access to, when she wanted it, and nothing required Adrian's approval. When she saw the changes, she looked at him carefully. "You changed the doors." Adrian nodded. "Yes." "Why?" He touched the new control panel. "Because I finally understood the problem was never that you needed a locked door." His eyes moved toward her. "It was that you needed to know you could always open one." The words were quiet, but they carried more weight than any expensive gift. Later that evening, Adrian and Evelyn sat in the living room for the first time without a wall between them. The fireplace cast warm light across the dark room. Outside, rain traced slow lines down the windows, and the smell of tea filled the air between them. "Why did you become someone everyone fears?" Evelyn asked. Adrian looked at the flames. "Because fear was the only thing people never took away from me." She lowered her eyes. "And now?" He looked at her. "Now I am trying to learn something else." "What?" Adrian answered after a pause. Trust. The next day, Adrian faced the person behind the warning. Not with anger. Not with threats. He simply removed the power that allowed others to interfere in his personal life. He stepped away from partnerships that demanded control over his choices and made it clear that Evelyn's presence was his decision, not someone else's weakness to exploit. When he returned to the penthouse that evening, Evelyn was waiting by the entrance. She held a small envelope in her hand. Adrian stopped. "What is that?" she asked. Inside was a document she had prepared herself. He opened it slowly. It was not a resignation. It was not a goodbye. It was a request. Evelyn looked directly at him. "I want to stay, but I need to know something." Adrian folded the paper and waited. "If I stay here, will I still be free to leave?" The question struck deeper than any accusation. Adrian looked at the open doorway behind her, then back at the woman standing before him. And for the first time, he realized the hardest promise he would ever make was not keeping her close. It was proving she was free enough to choose him. Adrian Kang read Evelyn's question 3 times before answering. The penthouse was quiet except for the soft ticking of the wall clock and the distant sound of traffic moving beneath the glass windows. The warm lights above the living room reflected on the wooden floor, while the faint scent of tea remained between them. "If I stay here, will I still be free to leave?" Evelyn asked again. Adrian looked at the open doorway behind her. For years, every door in his world existed to control something. A business deal. A negotiation. A person's access. But now, standing in front of the only person who had never tried to gain anything from him, he understood the difference. "Yes," he said. "Even if leaving means losing you." Evelyn studied his face, searching for hesitation. There was none. The answer was not what she expected from the man everyone called impossible to challenge. The next morning, Adrian made the decision public. He gathered his closest executives in the same conference room where he had once allowed others to influence every part of his life. The room was cold, the glass walls shining under bright white lights, and the sound of documents sliding across the table filled the silence. "There will be changes," Adrian said. One executive looked at him carefully. "Because of her?" Adrian did not avoid the question. "Because of me." The room became still. He removed several restrictions that controlled his personal affairs and separated his private life from his business decisions. No one would decide who belonged near him. No one would decide who deserved respect based on status. Later that evening, Adrian returned to the penthouse and found Evelyn standing near the entrance. She looked at the empty space where the old security panel had been. "You really changed everything." Adrian placed his keys on the table. "I changed what needed changing." She touched the new system. "And if I walk out tomorrow?" Adrian answered without delay. "I will open the door." The simple response carried more meaning than any promise he could have made. That night, Evelyn stayed. Not because Adrian asked. Not because she needed protection. Because she chose to. The days that followed felt different. She moved through the penthouse without the feeling of being watched. She cooked when she wanted, rested when she needed, and left whenever she had plans outside. Adrian never asked where she was going. He only asked if she was safe. One evening, Evelyn returned later than usual. The rain outside had soaked the streets, and the smell of wet pavement entered through the open balcony doors. Adrian looked up from his desk but did not stand immediately. "Long day?" he asked. Evelyn placed her umbrella near the entrance. "Yes." A small pause followed. "But a good one." Adrian noticed the difference. She was not reporting to him. She was sharing with him. That was something he had never known how to receive. Later, they stood together by the balcony. The city lights reflected in the glass, and the cool night air moved through the room. "You know," Evelyn said quietly, "the old you would have locked every door to keep me close." Adrian looked down at the streets below. I know. And now? He turned toward her. Now I want you close because you choose to stay. For the first time, there was no struggle between them. No power separating them. No fear deciding for them. But just as peace settled into their lives, Adrian received one final message. It was not a threat this time. It was a photograph of Evelyn standing outside the penthouse entrance weeks earlier, before everything changed. Beneath it were only 5 words, "You cannot protect what you love." Adrian stared at the screen, then slowly closed his hand around the phone. Evelyn noticed his expression from across the room. "What happened?" she asked. Adrian looked at her, knowing the next choice would decide everything they had built. This time, he would not choose control. He would choose trust. And tomorrow, he would have to prove that the door he opened for her could never become a cage again. Adrian Kang looked at the photograph one more time before placing it beside the phone on his desk. The room was dark except for the city lights passing through the glass walls, the quiet hum of the penthouse ventilation filling the silence, and the faint scent of Evelyn's tea still lingering from the evening before. For years, Adrian would have reacted immediately. He would have closed every door, tightened every rule, and controlled every possible outcome. But this time, he did something different. He walked away from the desk and found Evelyn in the kitchen. She was washing a cup beneath the warm light above the counter, the sound of running water mixing with the soft rain outside. "We need to talk," he said. Evelyn turned and noticed the phone in his hand. Something happened. Adrian placed the phone on the table, showing her the message and the photograph. He waited for her reaction. Instead of fear, Evelyn looked at him carefully. "What are you going to do?" Adrian answered honestly. "My first instinct is to make sure nobody can reach you." She nodded slowly. "And your second?" He looked at the open doorway leading to the hallway. "To ask what you want." The answer changed everything. Evelyn sat down across from him. The expensive kitchen, the marble surfaces, and the quiet luxury surrounding them no longer felt like Adrian's world alone. It had become a place where both of them had a voice. "I do not need you to fight every battle for me," she said. "I need to know you trust me enough to stand beside you." Adrian listened. Not because he had to. Because he wanted to. The next morning, Adrian made his final decision. He invited Evelyn to a private meeting with the people closest to him. The same room that once represented power and control now became the place where he made his most important choice. The glass walls reflected the morning sunlight, the polished table shone beneath the ceiling lights, and every person in the room waited for Adrian to speak. "This is Evelyn," he said. "She is not here because she works for me. She is here because she matters to me." No one interrupted. Adrian continued, "Anyone who believes respect is based on status has no place in my life." It was the first time he had chosen a person over an image. Later that day, Evelyn returned to the penthouse and found Adrian standing near the entrance. The old security panel had been replaced once again. She looked at it and smiled slightly. "Another change?" Adrian shook his head. "Not for control." He handed her a small card. "For choice." She looked at the card. "What does it open?" Adrian looked toward the doors of the penthouse. "Every door here." Evelyn held it quietly. "And if I leave?" Adrian answered, "Then I will respect the person who chose to walk away." The room became still. The same man who once built walls around himself had finally learned that love was not something to guard like a possession. It was something to protect by allowing it to breathe. Months later, the penthouse no longer felt like a fortress. Morning light filled the rooms, the sound of Evelyn's laughter replaced the silence, and Adrian no longer measured his days by control or influence. He measured them by the moments he chose to share. One evening, Evelyn stood by the same door where she had once almost left forever. She touched the handle and looked back at him. "You know, this door used to feel like a wall." Adrian walked closer but stopped beside her, leaving space between them. "And now?" She opened it, then closed it again with a smile. Now it feels like a choice. Adrian looked at the woman who had entered his life with nothing but dignity and left him with something he never knew he needed. And that day, the world remembered that the strongest doors are not the ones that keep people inside, but the ones that stay open because someone chooses to remain.